Good day, viewers, and season greetings to all Guyanese around the world. I have with me, as you would all know, the Vice President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana and also the General Secretary of the People's Progressive Party. And today, we haven't had the Vice President for quite some time, and people want to know what's going on. Today is a very hectic day for Guyanese, and there's been a lot going on with politics in Guyana. People want to know, what is the government doing? How is the government addressing unease in certain sections of society that is being created by negative elements in our society? So to bring some clarity to that, I've asked the Vice President and General Secretary of the People's Progressive Party for this opportunity to be able to give you guys an update close to end of year that could bring some calm at this time in our country. Dr. Jagir, thank you for this opportunity once again. It's always a pleasure having you. To get right into it, we're just about wrapping up the season and going into where there's going to be calm, people are going to be home with their families and so on. But a lot has been going on. Can you give us a slight update from your perspective as to what the government has been doing, opening up a transparency portal to the government and giving people a better understanding as to what's going on?
So right now we're busy working on the budget for the new year. That involves wrapping up the projects and the accounts for the current year and deciding on the framework for next year and what projects we rank as priority projects. I can say in a macro sense that it will be a huge budget because, as we promised in the period when we were in opposition, and consistent with our goals of moving Guyana forward rapidly, and also the goal of ensuring that we do not in the future become totally reliant only on oil and gas, as many oil producing countries have done. That we plan not just to have the framework in next year's budget to accomplish those goals, but also to put in place a series of projects that would allow the development of the non-oil sectors of our economy, as well as to improve what we have promised before, the social well-being of Guyanese. And so, in a macro sense, that's the philosophy of the budget. People are going to hear more about the details as when we present the budget, which should be very early next year. So December is generally a busy month. All my life almost, there is no Christmas for people who work in government because you're always busy working in December to prepare the budget for the new year. So that is the primary issue at this point in time. We also have to contend with a number of other promises we made. We had promised to change the environment radically for the locals in the oil and gas industry through local content legislation. And we've had 1 year of extensive work trying to balance interests to ensure that the industry remains competitive, but that increasing amount of opportunities will come our way. We've just tabled local content legislation. This is a seminal piece of legislation. Very few countries in the world have this early in their production of oil and gas tabled such a comprehensive piece of legislation. If you look at the legislation and its various components, you will see it would radically transform the transparency surrounding the procurement of goods and services by the oil and gas companies and their contractors in Guyana. So Guyanese will know what the opportunities are. It would impose upon the oil and gas companies and their primary contractors the obligation of submitting to the government a local content master plan for 5 years, and then an annual seek approval every year for their annual local content plan. Within those plans, they would have to have 3 subcomponents. One to do with capacity building of Guyanese, another to deal with employment of Guyanese, and the third to deal with procurement opportunities for Guyanese. Those plans will also be published, so there'll be great transparency surrounding that. We are now going to have a register, 2 registers, one to deal with Guyanese companies and individuals who qualify as part of the local content bill to supply goods and services to the oil and gas companies. And the only qualification, the criteria for qualification would be Guyanese ownership of a company over 51%, 75% management must be Guyanese, and 90% of the workers must be Guyanese. If you meet those as a company, you can be on the list. So you have to have majority ownership by a Guyanese, or you can be a Guyanese national. Just you can register also to supply services. And then the second list will have all Guyanese, any Guyanese who has requisite skills for employment opportunities. They can put their names there, so that if the oil and gas companies are procuring labor and the skill is there, then they are obligated first of all to explore contracting these people, the Guyanese. So that would be huge for us. We then see also the master services agreement of the companies. So we are very excited about this. We have also carved out a significant percentage of business for exclusively Guyanese companies in the schedule in 38 sectors. So for example, by the end of 2022, 90% of all the rentals for headquarters space and accommodation by all the oil and gas companies and their primary contractors have to be procured from Guyanese. The same thing, transportation, etc. So it represents maybe $400 or $500 million of business annually coming our way for our people. And I urge them to make full use of this once the law is passed, to make full use of these opportunities. It is a seminal piece of legislation. So I was shocked that when the private sector said something favorable about it, Mr. Norton accused them of being biased and pro-PPP. The private sector was lobbying for this for 5 years. The last government did not do it. We promised it in opposition. We said this is key to make sure that Guyanese can benefit from this industry. Our people can prosper too, and we fulfilled that promise. We also tabled legislation to amend the local content, the Natural Resources Fund. And as you're aware, that was also a promise that we made in opposition, because we looked at what was passed and we had several issues with the legislation. First of all, the legislation that was passed after the no confidence vote, and the government had fallen. It has no legitimacy. We were not in parliament. So when I see this group of unaccountable NGOs signing a petition to the parliament and saying we must not consider the amendments until we get their clearance, well, and that the bill that was there before was the most consultative bill ever in the history of this country, it makes me want to vomit that these organizations that pride themselves in being the conscience of the society and the most accountable, that the safeguards of accountability in Guyana would want to even associate themselves with a bill that was passed after the government had fallen without any opposition input. But the petition was signed, and it's the usual suspects. Many of them were pro-AFC or members of the AFC or APNU in the past, but now they've reincarnated themselves into NGOs. So we can't pay too much attention to them and their bribe. We have to do what we promised the people of Guyana. We promised this in opposition. We campaigned on it. People voted for us to do these things. We'll get them done. So we had that problem about the legitimacy of the bill. The second concern we had was that the Minister of Finance controlled everything. The Minister of Finance controlled, he was in charge of the fund. He named the macroeconomic committee. He also was the sole person to calculate the fiscally sustainable sum that could be withdrawn from the fund, the Natural Resources Fund. Conceivably, theoretically, he could have withdrawn all the money every year from the fund with a formula that is not transparent and is subjected to manipulation. And so we made it very clear in opposition. We wanted to insulate the minister from the management of the fund. As a result of which, we now put in the amendment a board of directors. And there would be on the board of directors, one member from the private sector and one who has to come from the parliament. So the opposition gets a chance to have an input into one of the directors there. That board is appointed by the president. Now I saw a front page comment in the Starbuck News. They had an issue with the president appointing the board of directors now. Now, they didn't have a problem with the minister managing the fund directly, but now we are trying to insert a technical level of managers between the minister and the management of the fund, and who best to appoint the board of directors than the president. It's not the minister himself. So that then, if the board is a creature of the minister, then most likely it would report, it could do the bidding of the minister. At least the president can have greater oversight, and then you have parliamentary input and private sector input on the board. So we are forging ahead to get that done. Then we've replaced this complex formula with a simple one, that if any Guyanese, from a child to an adult, can now understand how much money will come to the treasury. So it specifies the first 500 million, it comes to the budget. Second 500 million, a percentage goes to the budget. That's if you get to $1 billion. If you get to 1.5 billion per year, then a bigger percentage is shared. If you get up to about when the fifth 500 million comes in, only 3% it comes to the treasury of that. The rest is saved for the future. So anybody at any point in time in Guyana can know precisely how much we'll save. You don't depend on the Minister of Finance every year manipulating or calculating the figures. Transparent. We replaced this oversight body with 22 organizations. Imagine the Guyana Press Association was one of the oversight bodies for the oil and gas company, for the oil and gas spending, and place things like organizations that have openly demonstrated bias, like TIGI, who was muzzled in the 5 years when all the transgressions took place. then they were there. So that's what they're probably defending their presence there. We replaced it with a body with labor, private sector, religious groups, 3 religious leaders to do the oversight. They present a report to the parliament that will be debated. And every cent of expenditure now will have to be appropriated. Any spending that will be financed from oil money. So it would have to go through a parliamentary process of debate and appropriation. We believe that this is a major improvement from what was there. And we promised that, we tabled it. We need to operationalize the fund so we can start. We haven't used any money as yet, so we can start using the resources to build the infrastructure of the future for the growth of the non-oil economy, for the creation of the not 50,000 but 200,000 jobs in the future, and to make sure that all of our people get better quality healthcare and education. That is why we had to make that reform before. We promised the reform of the Natural Resources Fund will come before we touch a cent of the oil money, and we fulfilled that promise. So we have worked at this. We've been working hard to get this done. We've had 20, 30 meetings on moving for just one project, the gas to energy project. We see how critical it is now. The rest of the world that was saying, oh, you can't use gas as a transitional fuel, and now going back to coal, the same countries that were lecturing us, and have like some of the organizations here telling us, oh, you can't develop that, that's not green energy. Well, there are those countries that they're taking their inspiration from, that had a lot of climate rhetoric pre-COP, that is the Conference of Parties in Glasgow. All of those countries have gone back to the bad old ways of using fossil fuel. They're busy pumping oil and gas, and they want to stop the development of the industry in the developing world, in Africa, in Guyana and Suriname, so that they can maintain a monopoly as producers there. So we have to be conscious of the global bias against countries like ours, and they use some of these NGOs to carry that bias, to create confusion here. Unaccountable NGOs. Those are the ones that get the publicity. So a lot of, I can't go through all of the things. It's been a really busy year, and maybe we'll spend more time talking about it when I do the press conference later. But just to give you an idea, we're really, the 16 months in government has been a mad dash to try to address things that were unaddressed in the past, putting in place the policy framework for many sectors, getting the planning process up and running, starting to work on the projects to achieve our goals, trying to raise the financing for those projects. It's been a really busy period, and then all of this being done in the context of the COVID situation makes it even harder. But the PPP has always in government been a party that worked very hard. We're not good at the PR, and often that has been the cause of our undoing. So whilst we're busy at work, our opponents are busy spreading falsehoods and lies, and they thrive on that sort of thing. So I think on the new year, we'll have to step up on the PR side to make sure that people understand what we're doing more. That you just can't work hard. Sometimes people just don't know about it. And the other side thrives on misrepresentation.
When you say step up your PR, Vice President, can we in the future expect you to start TikToking like TikTok Glenn?
No, I'm not. I find it very distasteful that this guy would every day go on TikTok and routinely lie. And some asinine views pass off as serious analysis there. And my fear is that people will actually believe some of these things because, not because they have any merit, but because of the preponderance of the it bears down on you, the daily grind, it repeats it over and over and over again. Now, there's no scientific view, for example, that the oil and gas industry caused the fish to swim away from Guyana. And he's telling the fishermen that the fish swim away. Now, if we can prove that's great, but there's no scientific view of that. I grew up in a fishing village in Unity. There are periods when we've had low catch too. The guys would go out many, many times and didn't bring in much. And that was long before we were producing oil, since I was a young boy. But suddenly everything relates to oil and gas. Or he had again this thing about the Marriott. We've dispelled that the Marriott belongs to me or Ashni Singh or etc. The last government knew that the Marriott is 100% owned by Guyanese. It's one of the most profitable Marriotts in the world. He still continues with this nonsense. How do you respond to a person who is almost a raving lunatic on a daily basis? How does a government respond to that without really demeaning itself or wild person? Because if I were to go every day, how can I even address an analysis that is not an analysis, that has no basis in fact or figures or something? Man who says, 1 month bonus, we're an oil producer. We haven't even started getting much money from the oil and gas sector. We haven't used any money as yet. They think that the money is just falling from heaven and the streets of Guyana are paved with oil money, and that every Guyanese should stop working and we should all get a big paycheck every day. We have to work hard to change this country. How do you address that? And then people go there. So we cannot go. So we will not be TikToking, but we are hoping that putting out information, more people will read it. But sometimes people like the familiar and the very anecdotal things in this country. And so maybe we're open to suggestions, but I think people who support the government also have to go to these web pages and point out sense, the comment section. They should go and take on the nonsense there, not by being abusive, but just pointing out the facts and how stupid sometimes the views are. I know that are being portrayed, and then maybe we'll have that balance.
As much as
but it's not just the TikTok. I mean, getting out more information to the public, being and taking on some of the people a bit more, like when these organizations come up, like the GHRA. Now, the GHRA is the most unaccountable organization possibly in the history of our country. It's a one-man organization that has been cozy in bed with APNU. Suddenly it's found its voice. And globally, when people hear Guyana Human Rights Organization, they will think this is an organization with a constituency and a weight. They issue a statement, it may be carried globally, and people would actually think that they have support. This organization has absolutely no support. It's a front organization. And so unless we do more work at pointing this out, but this is not just a task for the government. And they argue that and we have to get this view over to many of people in our society. That the ultimate act of transparency is fulfilling your promise for a political party. When we when we go and campaign on a manifesto, we had issued 35 slogans not slogans, but headlines we put. And we put them on scrolls and posted them around the country. So we took the key elements of the manifesto, not all of them. We said, we'll return the joint services bonus. I remember the same Norton saying this was a fake and all of that. We'll never get it done when we made the promise. Well, we have fulfilled that promise because we made the promise. When we said we put on the scroll, return the school kids grant, we did it in the first year. Not just did it, but we returned it. And we're on the road to increasing it to 50,000 in the 5 years. When we said that we will double old age pension in 5 years, the first year we increased by 25%. And we plan to double it by 5 years. So every one of those promises means something to us. When we said we will bring the gas on shore, do a 300 megawatt, 250 to 300 megawatt power plant, we made a promise. People voted for us because they wanted cheaper power. Now, somewhere in this society, people believe that having received the mandate from the people and the government having to go and come to the parliament, which is the opposition is present there, that has the other half of the vote of the people of the country, that they can sit. Now we must go and seek approval from these unaccountable organizations too before we proceed with projects. And that cannot happen. That is not good governance. So we have to spend more time talking about this in this society, because we cannot allow 40 gripers to thwart the dreams of the hundreds of thousands of our people, particularly the young people of this country. They want to see Guyana get to $30,000 per capita income. They want to have a brighter future. That is what we have to do. And this is a task for every right-thinking Guyanese, whether they support APNU or PPP.
Dr. Chagyo, as much as I would like to go on and have you expound more on fly-by-night NGOs, TikTokers, and the lunatics of social media, I would like to open up on 2 points you made earlier. For the layman, the man on the ground who wants to know what's going on, who wants to know how he's going to benefit. Because there are a lot you're saying, but a lot of times at the level that you are putting out that information, the layman doesn't understand.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Is it correct that the PPP is going into its third budget? Am I correct to say
yes,
third budget? Now, the PPP in this year's budget had outdone itself and also outdone previous administration, the previous PNC administration. That is 50-something years of politics. The PPP has outdone not only with a budget that goes into infrastructure and development in the country, but as it relates to cash in hand given to people because of COVID and everything else. No other administration has given so much to Guyanese in a year. Are we looking at a 2022 budget? For the layman, because there are things that are going to be more, you're going to be giving more in certain areas. But can we say, are you gauging the 2021 budget, and will the 2022 budget outdo the 2021? Is it sustainable?
Definitely, we are going to build on the 2021 budget. So as I said before, the promises we made would see increasing benefits. And we started, so yes, you're going to see more money for our children, for older people, for assistance of business, all of that will be part of the future. And then, of course, better health care. So right now we're thinking about an upgrade of the entire health system. that would see about $400 to $500 million spent on public infrastructure. To do that, we probably have to put down 6 new hospitals. A new children and maternal hospital, state of the art for the entire country, for kids and women. New psychiatric hospital, upgrade all of the current ones. We're working on the plans now. You'd see some of them in the new year starting to unfold as that. So healthcare is crucial. We want to be able, the guy in Essequibo Coast or in Linden or in Berbice or in the regions can have a CT scan without having to come to Georgetown. Right now they may have an X-ray, and because of APNU procurement from their friends, half of these X-rays now working. We're looking even now to standardize to a brand that is globally known, like a GE or a Siemens, that you can have long-term use. But the state of infrastructure is atrocious. So that sort of quality of care issue, we're not just looking at access, but quality of care. We still have to fulfill the promise of 20,000 scholarships. 6,000 are off this year. So it's building on the promises we made. So every year's budget will bring us closer to the realization of the promises that we made. Apart from that, it is the generation of the jobs. Since we got into office, in spite of COVID, you have more money in circulation now because we've taken back less than in taxes, about $40 billion less in taxes this year than people were paying. And we've injected more money into people's pockets directly, and that helps with the spending and the circulation of money and the economic activities. You talk to the shopkeepers now, they'll tell you about the traffic for Christmas. It doesn't happen by chance. If the government was taking $40 billion out of people's pocket through taxes, and that remains with them, that's $40 billion of disposable income that they can now spend back in the economy. If we inject through the children grant and the increase in old age pension, which is $4 billion, over $4 billion increase, just the 25% is equivalent to over $4 billion, and the flood relief and all of that, and the COVID grants directly, another $30 billion. That's money that people spend back in the economy. And so we've done quite a bit of that. The developed countries have done this through stimulus packages, some of them. But they didn't get more, a lot of them didn't get so directly into people's thing. They've given a lot of the help to the upper levels, and the business. We try to ensure that the help would reach people at the level of the home. We had some difficulties with that. When you're dealing with every household in the country, it's very hard. People try to dupe you. Some of the people we sent out shared the money. They were found to be unscrupulous. Some people in the households actually, and the flooding, they weren't eligible, tried to get the money and sometimes got it. But sometimes this is the problem of doing things at a large scale. But we've tried at the ordinary, you asked me about the ordinary level, where we try to get down to the household level. And we'll do that progressively, and in the new budget too.
Dr. Jagdeo, the PNC has recently held their 21st biannual Congress. What's going to be seen as, or labeled as, the head honcho is now Aubrey Norton. I have noticed that the PPP, and yourself being General Secretary for a number of years now, has reached out across the board to include Afro-Guyanese and make the PPP an inclusive party. Mere days after Aubrey Norton heads up the PNC, you can see that the Indians in the party are no longer there or have lost their voice. Right cross-section of society is worried about a new wave of racism. What say you, as General Secretary of the PPP, what say you to Aubrey Norton, who's come up with quite a bit of rhetoric and is causing a bit of scare in society, even claiming that the PPP is afraid of him? Can you say what, with your experience, being an experienced and seasoned politician, what does the PPP have to fear about an Aubrey Norton?
Well, first of all, you know, in the political history of our country, racism has been used as an important tool by some to mobilize people and to keep their base intact. So there have been accusations across party. The PNC has always accused the PPP of racism when in government. Our defense has been that you examine the track record of the PPP, examine the policies, examine the budgetary locations, the allocations, and examine the impact or the benefits, the achievements of Afro-Guyanese in the entire tenure of PPP terms in office. That is, and if you do that, we argue that you will see when PPP is in power that Afro-Guyanese have made the most progress, and we can demonstrate this by facts and figures. Those are in our defense. You look at our track record. But the real racist party, we have also said that PNC is racist. So that is the PPP now saying the PNC is racist. And we've pointed out to their track record. And let's go back, let's don't go back to the past. Let's look at just at the last 5 years. We've pointed out that over 10,000 Indo-Guyanese lost their jobs on the APNU in the last 5 years, from the sugar belt and in government. Over 10,000. And that almost the entire tenure, that although they profess to be broad-based, when you look at the diversity in the hiring and in the offices that people hold, you would see that there is no reflection of their philosophy, the so-called broad-based philosophy that they speak of. So even at the ministerial level, take for example Nagamutu. When you look at Nagamutu, you would see that his portfolio was limited to one thing: managing the information sector. And that sector practically ran itself. Look on our side, the Prime Minister, always a substantive figure. Sometimes, apart from being Prime Minister, had substantive portfolios, telecommunications, the electricity portfolio, marked as CDC, etc. So substantive. Look also at the others. Ramjatan had half of a ministry. They split the ministry, gave Felix half, gave Ramjatan the other half. Robson Ben now runs the merged ministry. We have a Minister of Labor who is Afro-Guyanese. We have Minister of Tourism, Trade, Tourism and Industry who is Afro-Guyanese. The Minister of Foreign Affairs is Afro-Guyanese. Minister of Public Works. These are substantive portfolios. Minister who works, Kwame McCoy also, who works with the Prime Minister in his office. These are substantive portfolios because we don't practice tokenism. And that is why we say examine track records. So it's one thing, but I'm coming back to the point. You might be wondering, why am I saying all of this now? So parties have often accused each other of being racist. But the worst thing that could happen to a leader is when its own leadership accuse the leader of being racist. So when they were campaigning, Roysdale Ford, a leader of the People's National Congress, a member of parliament, a key figure in the opposition, said that if Norton prevailed, the PNC will become tribal. So even with all of the racism of the past, they're even worried that it will get worse under Norton. It will become tribal. So Norton has prevailed. And if you were to believe Roysdale Ford, then the PNC now is going to become more tribal because a tribal leader has been appointed. That is from Roysdale Ford, not from me. Now, I saw many of the ordinary supporters. I've seen one gentleman on bench top. It was circulated several times. These are key activists who know Norton. They said, we know him. We have worked with him. He is racist. He is racist, and and they gave instances of his racism within the party about how he treated Indo-Guyanese in that party, the few that they had. And these are Afro-Guyanese leaders in the PNC who have that fear. So if we were to believe the leaders and activists of the PNC, what has happened is racism has triumphed in this Congress that they've had. They've elected a leader who's openly racist, and they believe that. So that is my take. Now, as it relates to the PPP fairing Norton, well, that's what he said, the PPP fairing. The PPP is a very old organization. We have over the years withstood all sorts of challenges. We've withstood every challenge thrown our way. From natural disasters to regular, I think the pigeons on the roof are moving around. Yes, so natural disasters, I think it might be someone up there now trying to get the pigeons out of the roof. Yeah, just check it. They're about.
I don't think it's going to affect our interview.
No. Just at the right moment. And have them get some coffee for me, please. Yeah. So yeah, now I needed my coffee too. So we have faced all sorts of challenges, from street protests to criminal activities, politically directed criminal activities. When they attack our Congress, they were sent to shoot up our Congress at Albion. They were sent to kill leaders of the PPP. The Buxton uprising was called a political insurrection. We withstood all of that. So Norton is suffering from a serious dose of delusion when he thinks that the PPP might fear him in the slightest. Now let me tell you I wish Norton well. I wish him well. He's been around a very long time, and he believes that he's entitled to the leadership over there. They have this sense of entitlement. I've heard it. And he said, oh, where are these Johnny come lately? So that's what he believes of new members. He called Roy Staleford a Johnny come lately, and many others who were saying things about him. So that is how he will relate to the newer members, that they're Johnny come lately and he is entitled. But longevity in the party doesn't mean that you have the requisite skills to be a leader, nor to manage the affairs of this country, or to inspire people to follow you. So even his advisor, the GHK Lau, who might be his advisor, said he might inspire fear but not respect. So that is an acknowledgement that he might be a figure that people fear. Well, we surely don't fear him. Where maybe in some quarters people do, but he cannot command respect. And so he has been, if you look at Norton's history, Norton has not distinguished himself in academia. Secondly, he has always existed at the fringes of the leadership of the PNC. And thirdly, his tenure in government has been as a junior functionary, no policy-making position. And even in the 5 years that they just emerged from, he was practically somewhere, I don't know where he was, but didn't, again, distinguish himself in any major role.
Do you see the lacking?
So when you are faced with that, how do you bring the requisite skills to the table to manage a country like ours that requires the good thing about, say, an Irfan Ali? Irfan Ali was a minister in his 20s. By the time he became president, he had been several years in the highest policy-making body, almost 6 years in the country. He sat in the cabinet of the country. He then spent several years in opposition as a spokesperson on economic issues. So he's familiar with the issues. He doesn't get overwhelmed by them. And the same problem Granger had. He never operated at that level. If you do not operate at that level, it's okay to go and try to mobilize a street protest. And Norton said, that's the only man in the world who campaigned on that. I can organize a protest better than the other two leaders, so elect me. So GHK Lal said again, if the outcome was, because he's very, I think he misses the cushy job he had at the Gold Board. So he said, that was expected in an Afrocentric party. Then the outcome was almost predetermined. But even in that, Norton doesn't have real legitimacy. So what is interesting to me is that at this point in time, most of the membership and the senior membership of the APNU AFC, they do not believe that they can win the elections in 2025, or that this bunch of leaders can guide them to any victory in the near future. And you would ask, why do you say that? Have you done a poll? Where did you get that idea from? So in the run-up to their Congress, they announced that they have 12,000 members and 3,000 delegates to the conference. Of the 12,000 members, 3,000 were delegates. And they can vote centrally or virtually. So there's no restriction to people voting, and the process is transparent. And then I examined how many people of the 3,000 delegates who attended the conference, either virtually or in person as they announced, how many actually voted. And just over 1,200 voted for the leadership. So that is about 40% of your delegates voting for the leadership. It meant that 60% of the people who were delegates to their Congress decided that none of the three candidates were worthy of their votes. They didn't even vote. So not
These are people with a direct political connection.
these were delegates. These were delegates to the conference. They announced 3,000 delegates were there, not the 12,000 members, but 3,000 were delegates. They themselves said that if you have 3,000 delegates, how come you only have just over 1,200 votes for the leadership?
And this meant that
60% of their delegates to their Congress did not vote for any of the three leaders. That you're in a bad shape when that happens as a political party. And this is putting on my political cap now. That's it. You're in a really bad shape. And then it's just about maybe, so if you look at, Norton didn't get all of the votes. So when you look at the total number of delegates who attended the conference, the vote that Norton got was just about 30% of total delegates. So he is a leader who got 30% of the votes of the total number of delegates. That is why I'm saying, how do you reconcile that? So all of the people were talking a lot about this industry, and about how well they did at the Congress and congratulating them. I don't see anybody doing that analysis. That 60% of their delegates decided that neither Harman, Norton, nor Van West Charles were capable of leading them into the future, and they opted. They just didn't vote. They just walked away.
Dr. Jagyo,
this is an important issue.
In simple terms, you do not see Aubrey Norton as an opponent. You see him as the undoing of the PNC, and that's already started.
I believe that the party will move more, will be insular, that if the leader and the membership belief and senior membership of both races in that party, they are, or not just both, many others, believe that the leader is racist, then the country, what does it leave the rest of the country to conclude? And so definitely they have a problem. We spoke to a number of members of parliament who were supporting Harman, and many of them said this guy is useless, that he's useless. He's the same thing they said, he's racist, and many of them will have to contemplate their future. They may still hang on because it's a job, but many of them don't believe he could lead or mobilize the party into any force to regain political office. So all of the things about committee of elders and inclusion, the right sounding language that he's making. But the people who know him over the years that he's been there, they say his true nature is going to be revealed in the future. Now, having said that, I wish him well. I wish him well if he believes his area of expertise is street protests. Trust me, he's not going to break the laws of Guyana, because he'll be met with the full force of the law. Trust me on that. Not going to break the laws, but this is a democratic society, and he could protest as much as he wishes once he complies with the law. And I've withstood, we in the PVP, we've withstood street protests from a charismatic leader, a Mr. Desmond Hoyt, when he would just make an announcement in the morning, and by midday, 5,000 people are on the square of the Revolution. And the PPP have had to live through that, and even with less capacity we have now, and less experience, we manage that. We can deal with Norton's street protests if he thinks that that the PPP will succumb to that. He doesn't understand the PPP. The old leaders, the generation that Norton comes from, the over 60s generation, they still believe that this may be the old PPP, and maybe even then the old PPP could not be bullied. But they can bully you into submission. The best way to engage with the PPP, we've laid it out before. Commit to a national agenda, move away from racism. There's room for us to work together. But don't believe that you can bully us into any submission. We've gone past those days. And so if Norton still believes that, he's stuck in that time warp. And even the things I saw Norton saying, he spouts their lies. He was part of the apparatus that tried rigging elections. But imagine Norton saying that the PPP has a history of rigging election. Even the most unrepentant, hardcore PNC would not say that today. The unrepentant, having gone through the documentation of the 3 decades of rigging, not from Guyana, but global documentation, all the reports to demonstrate that on the Burnham elections and then Desmond Hoyt were routinely rigged to stay in power. And then having the PPP in office for 23 years, where every international organization had been invited to observe the elections, from Carter Center, OS, Commonwealth, everyone, and they've certified the elections free and fair. He has the temerity, but also it tells you about the nature of Norton. He's still stuck in that era, and he's unrepentant with that feeling. And if a man can't stare the truth in the face and acknowledge it, then he can't help to craft the future of this country. How would he help to? Because it would be based on a foundation of lies. He says we have the expertise that we've rigged elections throughout history. That's the forte of the PNC. He goes on to say he will fight for a new voters list. Well, there is a ruling from the court that says that you cannot remove people's names from the voters list unless if they're migrated, etc. And why did that happen? We could have done that before, because all of us, PNC, PPP, everybody got together in the constitutional changes that we had in the early 2000s, and we removed residency from registration and voting. Prior, the old constitution you had to be 18 years old, Guyanese, and resident in Guyana. Three criteria. In the new constitution, residency was removed. So if you're now Guyanese and 18 years old, and you get a chance to register and vote.
No matter where in the
Where
world
in the world you are. So if a guy, you now move to live in New York, but you haven't given up your citizenship, you can come back and vote. You have to come back and vote. You can't vote abroad. We don't have overseas voting. But you have to come back and go into the area where you were registered to vote in. So, but this is all a fallacy about the list cause them to lose the elections, and there was fraud with the list because they tried to steal the elections through Mingo. It had nothing to do with the list by Mingo, which was demonstrated in the recount, inflating APNU's vote unilaterally, which is not on the statements of poll. That is as clear as daylight now. And so what has happened, let me give you an example. So in 2015 they won. You had 585, maybe 586,000 people on the voters list, and only 412 voted. But they didn't have a problem with that. They won the elections then. There was no problem with the voters list. In 2020, you had 461,000 persons on the voters list. Now 661,000 and 460,000 voted. So the extra people on the list didn't vote because we had a robust system on in the polling place. So if you're not here in Guyana, you can't vote. Although your name may be on the list. Constitutionally, we can't remove it, but you can't vote. So they didn't have a problem in 2015 with that issue, with inflated lists. But suddenly when they lost the elections by trying to steal, they disappeared their statements of poll. And we couldn't get it from GCOM. Well, when GCOM supplied the real statement of poll now and gave it to the Chief Justice, and we did the recount, it showed the PPP won the elections. They were trying to steal the election. So a leader who starts off with this nonsense, he had an opportunity now to come clean. But you already see what he will use. He said he will do grassroots work. So his grassroots work now will be to spread racism and lies. And that's what he has an orange walk office, and he's good at that sort of thing. You know, so they're good at spreading lies, going into the communities and telling people, oh, you're being discriminated against, you didn't get the flood relief. Norton might be good at that sort of thing. But to lead and wage a campaign and to give leadership on policies where it matters, he doesn't have the requisite skill. And he campaigned on a lie. He said, I don't know how he's going to deal with Harman and the others now, because he said he wants inclusion. But he said they had skeletons in their closet. That basically they were corrupt. That was part of his campaign, that he was the only one who was clean, that the entire group of them were corrupt, and that many of those members of parliament now are useless, and that he wants to get rid of them.
Dr. Jagio, a lot could be said, a lot of facts are out there about the opposition, and that might be to their undoing in the future. We all look at it that way. But none within our society are without wrongdoings. Yeah. Recently, one of the ministers in your government asked for, in a Facebook post, spoke about the defracking of the Court of Appeal justices. Is that the sentiment of your government, or you think that was just the minister in his own little way going off and not realizing as an executive member he should act in a certain manner? What's your take on that?
Well, I think a lot of people are very frustrated in Guyana about judicial unaccountability. We have seen, particularly in the period in the post-election period, some of the weirdest, not based on law decisions that were given by our courts, that brought us not in only nationally into disrepute, but globally, has caused the questioning of the independence of our judiciary and its accountability and its partisanship. This is a global questioning of the issue. We've recently seen the person who headed the recount in Guyana speak about this in a lecture in Barbados, but it is not confined to Barbados. And this haunts us in many ways. If people feel that the judiciary is not objective, that it is biased, it has political preferences, it will not just affect the individuals in the judiciary, but it will affect our country. In every way whatsoever. It will affect us in the commercial front, on the transparency front when we're assessed internationally. So clearly, Guyana cannot turn a blind eye to this issue. The people, regardless of which side you're on, or even if you're in the leadership of the judiciary, that there is this question out there. How come we have such grave disparities in the rulings and let me leave it at that, grave disparities in the ruling. So we cannot, where I think the minister erred, is to personalize it, to go after individuals. However, we have to address this issue. It has to be addressed. And I think maybe it's time that we explore a different model. You know, at the level of the executive, you have to be accountable to people. And even at the legislature, because people observe you, they vote for their seats in the parliament, so you have to be accountable. How is it as a country we can make the judiciary more accountable to the public, not to the executive? And I believe that we may have to start exploring a system like maybe more the American model, where the public, without maligning the individual judges, be allowed to comment on and debate decisions of the court openly, without any fear of being called before the court for contempt. And I think as a society that is seeking to be more accountable, I'm just being very cautious because, and it's just some thoughts flowing through the head. We discussed this at the government level as yet, but I think it is time that we deal with this matter. We can't leave it lingering and unanswered.
Hence, more
unaddressed.
people will express their frustration.
Unaddressed, because clearly it's the elephant in the room that nobody wants to touch about decisions that were made in that period, that the Caribbean Court of Justice, if you look at the scathing criticism of the CCJ, the highest court in our country, they almost disbelieve that such decisions could have been made. Almost disbelieve that such decisions could have been made. They imply that a person even without knowledge of the law would have made probably better decisions. The total disbelief that such decisions could be made. And you know what happens in our society. And so there is a feeling now that whether you like it or not, that the judiciary acts in a partisan manner in some cases, particularly the political cases. When it's not the political cases, then there is greater level of independence, but there is a partisan in some there are partisan rulings in some quarters, and so we have to come to grips with it. It's a societal concern, and it's about the credibility of our judiciary. And so how best we address this, and would that be maybe public scrutiny, debate over the decisions, force judges to be more reasoned in their judgment? Or could it open up a floodgate where you have unwarranted criticisms of the judiciary?
Some thought has to be put into it.
No, definitely. But we can't leave it unaddressed. We cannot leave it unaddressed. So I believe, whilst the minister I should have probably maybe been a little bit more careful about calling for removal of judges, but because that's definitely not within his remit, and there is a constitutional process that you have to go through if you want to do such a thing, and that's above his pay grade. But I can sympathize with him about on the frustration side.
But I sense it doesn't come as a surprise, since that minister is known to be impulsive.
Yes, but impulsive doesn't mean unthinking. I'm sure he is very passionate. And he expresses himself. I'm not going to chastise him for expressing a frustration that I felt too, but he went probably a little too far on calling for removal, which is not his remit. Or even I wouldn't call for that, because that could be seen as trying to influence removal of a judge, and we definitely don't want that. But I too shared his frustration, so I'm not going to sit here and run him down for expressing that frustration, which I've heard expressed by many lawyers and non-lawyers alike, ordinary people. Many people, I'm sure you sometimes sit and wonder, what kind of decision is this?
Playing an integral role in the process and going through the election process and the 5 months after the election, yes, and times it was confusing as to try to understand why or the logic behind decision making in certain sectors of the judiciary. But Dr. Jadio, in other terms, we got to wrap up. We could go on all day with the shortcomings of society. The president has not seen any reason to meet the opposition leader, and he said it needs to be constitutional. He will, and that is, the president has said, because of the fact that the opposition leader has not recognized or continued to claim the installed government and this kind of thing. So the president saw no need to meet the opposition leader. When head of the PNC now said he would speak to the executive to find out if he could speak to the president. Does the president have any reason to speak to the head of the PNC?
No. That's not That's not provided for constitutionally. The head of the PNC, he should be, if he wants to meet the president, he should be submitting a request to the president, not about he'll talk to the exec. But that's typical Norton. You know, he speaks with gravitas as though it is profound. And if you listen to what he has to say, it's very nonsensical. Or I will speak with my executive to decide whether I'll encourage Irfan Ali. Well, Irfan Ali doesn't want to engage the leader of the PNC. So he could speak to his executive as much as he wishes. He could speak to anybody in the PNC. He could go and speak to the guys at the rum shop. Why would Irfan Ali even want to engage with him, and he has to get permission from them to engage with the president when the president has no constitutional duty to engage with him? He's not the opposition leader.
Does it come across like Norton's intention in creating
more air of self-importance, an air of self-importance? That is typical Norton. And so this area of self-importance, I have to speak with my executive, as though Irfan Ali is just sitting waiting at the State House to receive a call from Norton. I want to speak with you and to roll out a red carpet. You know, it's nonsensical. So he could talk as much as he wishes to his executive. Now, the issue is who will be the opposition leader? Because as you know, Granger is the head of the list. I'm the head of the list for the PPP. Granger is the head of the list for APNU. So the leader of the opposition position can only be changed if Granger wishes. And Harman, from the last time I heard him, said he's not giving that up. So they have an issue as to whether Harman will give up. And Granger, having said that Harman is practically corrupt, they'll have a nice little chat. They need to have a nice little chat over there to decide what will happen with
so
the leader of the opposition.
Even in moving forward, the PNC's future, the environment is very stormy.
I don't know. I don't particularly care too much about what their internal politics is, but I know for sure he's going to. This Norton will talk the talk of inclusion, but exclude a lot of people because of that character trait. He would exclude a lot of them. And I know for sure that he doesn't have, given all I've said before, the requisite skill to lead a campaign or a government.
There's a high likelihood with what you're seeing and Norton's rhetoric. Some persons in the PNC would be running for cover. Is the PPP open to offering asylum? Because there's only two political environments you could sustain yourself
but
in.
we're open to a lot of people. Our party has over the years worked with people who've come to us. Leslie Ramsamy came, Peter Ramsoup had his own party. A number of other people who came in. Odinga, they were in GGG, Joe Hamilton, PNC came into. There was a number of other people. I can give you a long list of people. Mansour Nadir at one stage joined the cabinet. We have been a party open to people. We just don't, we're not too big on the rhetoric, but in practical sense. And if people commit to the program, we made it clear we are inclusionary. And so we're open to everyone working. that is the philosophy of the party.
Dr. Jagger, I want to thank you for this opportunity. Is there anything you want to leave with the Guyanese citizens?
Well, nothing.
today?
I hope people, we're this is Christmas Eve, right?
Yes.
So I hope they have a really Merry Christmas with the family gets together. People need to stay safe. That this new variant of the COVID-19 virus is a difficult one. It is now infecting people who are even vaccinated globally, and so we have to be, it spread rapidly, so we have to be very cautious. People need to continue taking precautions. So stay safe and enjoy the Christmas holidays. So, and you too, Critic, I hope that you have a pleasant holiday, and including Mr. Norton, because regardless of what I say, as I said before, I wish him well. This is how I see in real politics how their chances, and this is my analysis. But I hope he does well too.
Thank you, Dr. Jagger.
Okay.